Hey, thank you all very much for coming along to this session on supply chain. There's one problem with being a supply chain person, it's you're always looking out for those opportunities. And today, on the way to this session, I really wanted a cup of tea. Now, not American tea, not cold, warm, with milk. And I stopped off at that very famous provider of coffee, and they had no English tea. It's okay, it's all right, I can live with that, because there's always another one. So I carried on my journey towards the conference room, and I finally get to the next store. Queue up, as you do, dutifully wait. I'm British, I love it. Finally get to the front of the queue, say, English breakfast tea, of which there are none. However, cunningly, I always carry 2 tea bags with me, for this very reason when I travel in America. But fortunately, I'm in Vegas where you pay for everything. So I even had to pay $1.78 for a cup of hot water. Brilliant. So that was a great start to the day, and I won't even talk about losing my bags on the way here. So John McFall, I look after AWS's business unit that specializes in supply chain, transportation, and logistics. We really did try to keep the business unit focused. So as you can imagine, it's a fairly broad series of topics. So I'm not going to be able to cover everything in great depth. However, I can see from the audience that there'll be guys super interested in different aspects. There are no points for getting to the end of the presentation. So if you have got questions and we want to turn it into a dynamic session, then Nesh has very kindly agreed to act as a mobile microphone. So go ahead and feel free to stop me, ask a question. You can probably tell I have a bit of an accent, so I'm from Belfast, and that means breathing is optional when talking. So as a result, I can really squeeze a lot of stuff into a short period of time. So again, if you don't understand something or you want me to repeat something, just shout. I'm very accustomed to it. All right, so what's the agenda of today? So we're going to talk a little bit about what you already know about Amazon. And I'm going to maybe ask you some questions about what you think you know. And then we'll go and have a little look about our digital supply chain spectrum before we dig into some of the other areas. So let's go straight to it. What do you already know about Amazon? So maybe we could ask the question, what is Amazon? What do you think? What comes to your mind when someone says Amazon? Any thoughts? Delivering packages, yeah. Screensaver for mom.
An addiction.
Sorry?
An addiction.
Yeah. Addiction. It's coming up to Christmas time. Just to be clear, for all the gentlemen in the room, I'm sure you'll be ordering 2 days before Christmas. So, stand by. It's quite rushed. Any other thoughts? Film distribution, logistics company, freight forwarding, global mile. It's huge, right? But of course, we're also a media producer, making our own movies. We make our own devices. So there's all sorts of complication within even just the Amazon supply chain. And it's everything from the distribution of film digitally right through to maintaining our own distribution of our physical products that we manufacture, et cetera. So it's a fairly complex piece. But we're going to focus mostly on the retail business because it's that we're most interested in terms of understanding how Amazon operates. So more than billions of packages, 185 countries. In Q4 2019 in Europe alone, 19 billion packages. So a huge number of packages being delivered to customers. Hopefully, mostly on time, and hopefully, mostly what you actually ordered, because we do strive for that customer centricity. We don't always get it right, but when we don't, we hope that the connected customer experience helps us. So in terms of going the wrong way. In terms of Amazon itself, when we talk about this notion of unprecedented scale, this is when you're driving by Texas and you suddenly see the 1 million square foot facility and you're like, wow, Amazon, unprecedented scale. But for me, that's just one way to measure it. We have more than 250 million unique products, represented at 450 million at the SKU level, so physically on the shelf. So that's another way to measure complexity. But, it doesn't really scratch the surface. For anyone here who's working in supply chain, you know what I'm about to go into here. We need to move the product from China. We need to be moving it across to the US like everybody else. We don't own our global mile. So we are dependent upon Maersk, Kuehne Nagel, MSC, and everybody else to move that volume for us. We don't own all aspects of our freight forwarding capability. And nor do we own all aspects of our middle mile. So yes, we have Amazon Transportation Services, but we are dependent upon Eddie Stobart's, JB Hunt, everybody else to move the volume. And of course, there are not enough tractor units, nor are there enough drivers. So if you want to go and buy a tractor unit and you want to go and sell your services to us, we will happily buy it from you. So therefore, we are also using mom and pop shops with 1 or 2 tractor units. And we're having to do that in every single country where we operate. And then it gets even more complex, right? Because that's one aspect. But what about getting it to the end customer? So when it comes to getting it to the end customer, look at Europe, we are using Post Couriers, Belgium Post, UPS, we're using our own delivery service partners, we're using Flex drivers, Amazon Logistics, Royal Mail, you name it, we're using them to get it into the hand of the final customer. Because there's insufficient capacity for us, never mind everybody else that needs to move volume around the network. So when I talk about unprecedented scale, for me, it's more about that communication effect, the data transfer effect, the ability to coordinate all of that seamlessly so that the customer is delighted with a standard package in their hand, on time, on promise, at the right quality. The next aspect is hyperspeed. And when I listen to all my sort of solution architect types, 29 million transactions per second over the Amazon website, they're all like, that's fast, John. Now, fortunately, as you can probably tell, I'm not a solution architect. So for me, that's super interesting. But I step back and I say to myself, do you know what, though? We're also underpinning NASA, and we're also underpinning large banks, massive streaming services. So I hear you about the transactions over Amazon, but in the context of AWS, it's got to be proportionate. So really the big thing for me, and for many of you, will be the physical arrival of a product in your hand. So let's get a question from the audience. So the US is our busiest market. Q4, not surprisingly, the busiest quarter. Last year, we decided to put ourselves under a bit of pressure, so we put Prime Day in Q4. And then we thought, you know what, we also have this thing called the pandemic, and I don't want to make light of it. I know it's a very devastating piece, but we have the pandemic, and that's causing operational challenges, right, that we all faced. Separation of people, limitation of capacity, and everything else. So in the context of the pandemic, busiest day, busiest quarter, busiest market, how quickly, fastest time, not average, do you think Amazon was able to put a product into the hand of a customer from point of order? What do you reckon? Thoughts? Shout. Sorry? 1 hour. Any takers? Processing the order, picking the order, packing the order, physically taking it to the customer door. Height of the pandemic? 2 hours? 10 hours? The answer is 29 minutes and 54 seconds. Okay? Now let's reflect on that for just a moment. There are companies that can do it faster than that. But the companies that are doing it faster are doing it normally with a discrete product line for a dedicated purpose. In other words, I've got a legal document, I need you to take it from one office to the other because lawyers still like to create paperwork. So, there's a guy in spandex, ready to go, you hand him the legal document, he jumps on his bike, cycles over, hands it over, job's a good one. But we're trying to do it with 250 million unique products, 450 million at the SKU level, and we're trying to identify which of those products can actually be delivered fast at scale. We are not delivering a washing machine anytime soon in Manhattan in 29 minutes. Okay, so we need to identify exactly what can be delivered. So when we talk about speed in that context, it's not necessarily the physically handing the product over to you that matters. What matters is that we are able to use AI and ML at scale. Because what we're able to say is, what product types could we deliver in sub-hour? What are people likely to require in Boston in the sub-hour requirement? And by the way, Boston is not homogeneous. So the north, the south, the east, the west are different. So what are people likely to require in those parts of the city at the block level? And then, of course, that's only part of the jigsaw, right? Because we also need to know what volume is present in the fulfillment center, not more or less. Not get your notebook out and tell me. I need to know. I need to know the weather conditions. I need to know the traffic conditions. And I need to be able to provide the customer with a promise before they've even ordered the item. AI, ML at scale. So to me, that is a better indication of speed than virtually anything else. Then the next aspect is this notion of relentless innovation. Now, I'm told that I should never mention the Fire Phone, even though it was obviously a big hit. But we have innovations with things like AWS, which is a massive innovation. It's a very obvious one. But even with a flop like the Fire Phone, we were able to draw out components like Alexa, which then subsequently go off to be very successful. But those are things you could just, they're big. But what about all the little innovations that you just walk by? If you log on to Amazon and you go to buy an inflatable kayak, the very first thing we're going to offer you, 2 paddles so you don't get stuck up the creek without them. The very next thing we're going to offer you, a blow-up vest so you don't drown. Then we're going to go and get you one of those little baggy things that you can put your cell phone in, and we're going to offer you all sorts of stuff. Why? Because you didn't want an inflatable kayak. What you wanted was to go and spend time on the water with your family. And in order to do that, there's lots of other things that you require. That's a cool innovation. It really is. It's one of the, you walk by it, you wouldn't even think about it, but it's a cool innovation. And what we do is we take that sort of innovational thinking and we bring it out to our customers. So I'm working with a remote operation up in Canada. And we say to the, to the supply chain team, what's the challenge, repairing of vehicles, whatever it is. And the reality is that the engineer in that remote location doesn't want an oil filter. They might be ordering an oil filter, but they don't want an oil filter. What they want is a serviceable vehicle. So if more often than not, when you buy an oil filter, you also require a special oil filter tool and oil and a sump tray and various other components, offer that all up front to the engineer so that they can make a selection of what they actually require so that when the parts arrive, vehicle gets serviced. Because that's what we actually want. And taking that innovative thinking into your supply chain helps change the way that you think about delivery. It's not about putting the cell phone in the hand of your customer. It's about making the customer able to take a picture of the lunch so they can share it with the world, because we all need to see more pictures of people's food. Right? So it's that ability to make sure the phones are activated. Then, of course, we like to think of ourselves as being a customer-centric organization, customer-obsessed, to use an even stronger word. I'm going to let you be the judge of that, because you're going to hear me talk about customers as we go, but we'll see what you think. So in terms of the digital supply chain spectrum, this is a little bit like the political spectrum. Now, before you take a deep breath, Northern Irish person talking about politics on stage in America, it's okay. I'm not going to. I'm just going to say this. You're neither left-wing or right-wing on every issue. And therefore, depending upon the issue will depend upon where you are on the spectrum. And it's the same as this. You're neither nascent in everything. You're likely to be quite advanced in some areas and quite nascent in others. And when you look at this spectrum, the sorts of symptoms that you hear for someone in nascent is things like, I'd love to be able to find out what's on that truck, but I would have to pull out one Excel spreadsheet that tells me all the trucks that I've got. I would have to pull out another Excel spreadsheet that tells me what all the purchase orders are, another Excel spreadsheet that tells me where all the customers are. I've got a little pie chart to make by lunchtime, and then I need to do all of these things just to find out what's on one truck. And it's really painful. So you can't really react to dynamic situations. In other words, I phone you up and I say, hey, I'm sorry to tell you, but the ship that's coming into Boston, 2-week delay. Probably not an awful lot that most businesses in nascent can really do about that. It's a very manual process to react. But you see, there's a trick to get out of this, isn't there? And the trick to get out of this is to go and speak to your CFO, who are always very friendly people, and say, give me $4 million. Because what I'm going to go and do is I'm going to buy a whole load of best-of-breed SaaS offerings, software as a service offerings, and I'm going to go and buy myself out of that nascent requirement. That's cool. Problem then becomes, I have got an advanced fuel management system, I have an advanced fleet scheduler, I have an advanced labor scheduler, and so forth. But when I want to actually find out what's going on, I need 1,500 passwords. I need to download all the data into Excel so that I can then combine the data sources to be able to make a decision. And now everybody's frustrated because we didn't get the chance to get this benefit that we were talking about from the cloud. We're getting best of breed, but siloed. The way that Amazon operates is that Amazon is predominantly autonomous. Predominantly. If you go into one of our FCs, we have magnets with people's names on them, stuck on whiteboards, managing scheduling in some areas. We do even use Excel. But more often than not, for the bigger things, we have automation. And I'm going to show you some of that as we go. The final type is integration. And in integration, this is where we're trying to make it seamless. So I work with a corrugate manufacturer. I consume boxes. I provide the corrugate manufacturer with my inventory holding dynamically so they know exactly what I've got, they know my rate of consumption, and their sole job is to make sure that I've got the right corrugate at the right time to sustain my operation. What that means is that I don't phone them up in November with 200 fulfillment centers and say, we all need more boxes, and we suddenly find that our supplier is unable to meet the requirement, not because they don't want to, but they just can't. So by actually saying, just give me what I need, we hope that we can actually manage the process. And that becomes integrated, right? So I'm just paying for it seamlessly. I don't need to phone anybody up. It just happens. And that's a lovely place to be. But for Amazon, that's something that we're pushing into, but we're not there in all regards. Then how do we do this? Well, we think about supply chain in certain pillars. And these won't surprise you. This is not rocket science. In the first pillar, we have planning. And when we talk about planning, it's everything, right? We're talking about labor planning, we're talking about capacity planning, truck planning, we're talking about spot logistics, fuel purchase, EV charging, all of it. Plan, plan, plan. And all of that planning needs to be in some way integrated, right? Because there's no point in planning, EV charging, but not thinking about your outbound flows. Because all the vehicles will be on charge at the wrong time. And of course, if you're in California, where maybe you're only allowed to charge certain times, there might be also challenges around how you're actually going to sustain the management. The next aspect is this notion of collaboration. It doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are in this space. You have to work with everybody. Now, I outlined that notion of not owning all aspects of your supply chain. So that means you can't walk around with a big stick demanding that people deliver stuff for you. It ain't going to work. Transactional relationships aren't going to work. You have to find a way of being able to coordinate your activity with everyone. Let me give you an example. I was running a fulfillment center just outside of Peterborough in England. And I was on a Friday call at 1700. I was that guy. And all of my fulfillment centers begin with the letter E, so I'm going to be there for a long time. So I've already told my wife I ain't coming home. And I get the call that says my delivery estimated accuracy has fallen. Not only fallen, you, John, are actually dragging down the whole European average. So to be super clear, you're fixing that problem, and you're fixing it now. Okay? So when I did the work, I found that one of our service providers was the root cause. They were simply messing up. And it would be very easy to phone them up and get all angry and everything else. And I probably was a bit grumpy, but it was late on the Friday. So what we did is we went out and actually visited their delivery station. What can we do to make this easier for you? And it turned out that they didn't want to let us down. They didn't want to let Amazon down. So they wanted to make sure that they were just taking the volume. They didn't want to complain. But what we were doing is we were deliberately storing all of the packages until 1700, putting them on the truck, and then sending the truck. Which meant that at 1730, they would open the door, and it was like Christmas. They're like, oh. They had all this day where they were doing nothing, and suddenly they've been swamped with volume. So a very simple fix, of course, is free flow the volume. So they just started taking the volume off the dock, and it resulted in my delivery estimated accuracy not resulting in Friday calls anymore, and everybody was good. But it's just a simple example, right? It's just a simple example of not blaming anyone else in your supply chain, but working together in a collaborative way to solve a problem. And sometimes it doesn't need technology. The other aspect is to do with execution. And the execution bit really then falls down to this notion of so what when the situation changes. And there are great bumper stickers in the US that sort of say it, right? It happens. So when it does happen, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when the truck is late? What are you going to do when the road is blocked? The border is closed. The port is congested. And that means we have to be able to take into account all of our planning. We have to be able to take into account all of our collaboration, and we have to make a change. So for instance, we might say, well, let's just take the volume and send it to a different fulfillment center, for argument's sake. But we need to take into account that the inventory is now in the wrong place. That's going to change the customer order profiles. It's going to change the cost, the variable cost of unit for production, et cetera. And it also means that the next time the volume comes in, we don't need to send it to that fulfillment center anymore. We need to send it to a new one. So that whole notion of execution needs to be dynamic, and it needs to understand the planning, and it needs to understand the collaboration. In other words, what you must be able to do is to draw insights out of your supply chain that enable you to be able to make accurate decisions. But how do we do it? Well, we have these mechanisms that we use. What are mechanisms? Well, if I tell someone to go and do a better job, they already think they're doing a good job. So in the end, they're not going to try to improve whenever they're already doing a good job. So we need to have processes, tools, and inspection methodology that enables us to hold ourselves to account so that we actually do the things that we do. But what I want to nail quickly is architecture. And the architecture is important because it underpins how I'm going to set up the rest of the conversation. So when we talk about architecture, we use microservices. And the microservices, the best way to think about them, is a small widget of technical capability that solves a specific problem. Here is one. So this lady has been sent to the right part of the fulfillment center to pick a product, to put it into the toad. That is the pick microservice. That's all it does. That's all it will ever do. There's a whole team of people that look after pick. They innovate in pick, and they do all sorts of cool things with pick. But to pick something, you need to know what it is. You need to know where it is, etc. In other words, you need other microservices that communicate effectively. You bring that together, now you're able to go pick a product. If you want to do labor planning, cross-border tax reconciliation, and all of these other things, you end up with Amazon.com. Right? Now let's reflect on this for 1 second, because it's always good to do the opposite test. If we were now to go and close the doors, and don't worry, the guys aren't going to do this. If we go close the doors, and we've got lots of clever people here, and I said to you, let's go and draw end-to-end every single aspect of your business's supply chain, we'd fail, right? We'd fail. But even if we were remotely successful, somebody like me would come along and completely break it, because I would do something you hadn't anticipated. So this notion of the microservices enables you to be quite dynamic in how you go about solving complex problems. And it also enables you to think differently about how you use it. So you might be using an access control card for simply gaining security to the building. But that access control card could then be used to help allocate someone to a workstation, or to have their coffee ready whenever they walk through the door, or to ensure that there's actually English breakfast tea available. So in that notion of Amazon, you can see the microservices work. So what? There is an absolute explosion of data. There are lots of people that want to come and interact with your data. And because there's an explosion of data and people interacting with your data, guess what they want to do? They want to make decisions. So that means that it is no longer good enough to have a 24-hour batch processing inventory position. You need to know. If you're going to make a decision, you need to know. And I give you an example. I was working with one customer, and at midnight, they would virtually send the inventory to the store manager. And then at 10 o'clock the next day or so, the truck would arrive with the inventory. The truck may have the inventory that was virtually sent to you, but there was no reconciliation between those two positions. So you have a very clever algorithm that is correctly identifying which place to send the inventory, and then you have an execution that's not necessarily linked to the two. So you have a breakdown in this notion of decision-making versus the accuracy of your data. So in Amazon, we have more than 50 different systems that are doing nothing but scanning the horizon for inbound flow. Checking the capacity of our fulfillment centers. Are we paying the right price for the products that we're bringing, for the logistics that we're using, and so forth. Why? Well, because we need to do inventory planning and control. And that means we need to be able to simulate the capacity being space, physical space on the shelf. Capacity being process capacity being specialist logistics. We carry hazmat, so we got perfumes and so forth, and it has to be stored under specific conditions. And in certain jurisdictions, those restrictions are further convoluted. We have micro supply chains. Apparel is really challenging to move for anyone in that industry. I feel your pain, especially when it comes to January. So we have all the apparel to deal with, and it has to go through specialist supply chains, beer, wine, spirits, etc. And this is what it looks like when you move away from Excel. This is a view that an Amazon employee would have if they were looking at the inventory position. You can see the number of units. You can drill through the units, hard lines, soft lines. You could go and see whether it's consumer electronics, high-value items. It doesn't matter. And therefore, you're able to take a detailed view as to what's going on within the inventory and what's coming towards you. That's inbound operations only. Then the problem is, though, is that you have some really big companies that we work with doing great things, Procter & Gamble's and others, who are moving volume into Amazon. But we also have some small companies, John McFall & Co., who sell 2 mugs a year over Amazon. In all of those instances, we need to be able to take the volume and bring it to our equation. So we need to be able to provide an API gateway for advanced customers that seek to just push the data to us electronically. And we also need to be able to provide a gateway for people that need to log on to our portal and update. And in that way, we're able to help small businesses to gain entry to a global market, which is very exciting. And you know how proud we are of our small vendors getting and becoming very successful. So those give you that ability to do it. And then when you take a step away from it again and you move into the business area where many of you will operate, in this instance, we're able to then provide detailed summaries with confidence levels And for those of you that are working with data, you know how important it is. We need to be able to provide the confidence level so that the business user understands what model and simulation outcome is relevant to them. So in this instance, you can see that the confidence level is low for all of the data in that first slide. It's good to know it's low, so I don't go and hire 2,000 people for the fulfillment center. Let's wait until we get that confidence level up so I know exactly what I need to hire. And we are able to then use that sort of information to be able to provide inventory visualizations and recommendations. You may or may not have heard the announcement about AWS supply chain earlier on today. And that's a screenshot of the sorts of tooling that is available. When you then think about why we're doing all of this, it's because we want to answer this one question. And the way that I reflect upon that is really, what would you do if you knew for sure something was about to happen? But the real trick here is that you have to be able to reason on top of the data. It's not good enough to just be able to see it. You have to understand what it's telling you. Example, ports are somewhat congested at the moment and have been for some time. So Amazon identifies that along with everybody else. And we recognize that, yes, the big deep sea ports are, but the smaller ports are not. So we take smaller vessels out of charter and we re-roll them to TUC carrying vessels. Then we identify that there are insufficient containers in the world, so we have to manufacture our own. So we're now manufacturing our own containers, placing them on chartered vessels, and sending those vessels into smaller ports. That's really expensive, and we're a frugal company. So you can't do it for everything. So therefore, you need to use data to reason as to which SKU does it make sense to ensure that you've got on your shelves at all times to delight your customers. And at what point can you step away from doing this to get back into normal operations where you're able to also ensure that you're passing on the right savings to the customers. So it's data-driven everything. And this is my Sanskrit, so my apologies. And if you look at what I'm interested in, I'm super interested in these operational efficiencies. I'm after them all day long. What would it mean for you if I was able to take 1 day of inventory holding out of your business? If I was able to improve your labor cost by 1%. If I was able to improve your truck fill rate by 1%, reducing your fuel bill, whatever. Point is, for most big businesses, that's big numbers. And for some businesses, everybody in this room is retiring to the Bahamas if you can go and nail 1 day's worth of inventory. So it's worth getting at on a 1% use case. But there's no point in spending $10 million because you think you're going to get a $5 million savings per day of inventory. You need to spend a relatively small sum of money to go and experiment, to go and test the water. And if it's successful, then you need to be able to rapidly scale it. And that's the notion of experimentation within Amazon. I'll give you an example. So Tide, we all love it. You walk into Target, other stores are available, and it's got that really fantastic shaped bottle. You can see it, it stands out. It's a kind of a bright color. But as someone that works in e-commerce, it's a killer. Because now I've got to get this really awkward shaped bottle. I've got to place it into another tub so that it doesn't spill. And then I've got to place it into a cuboid. I mean, you're killing me. And I've got to package it all up. And I know it looks pretty, but you're killing me, right? So we work with Tide, and you're saying, look, guys, it doesn't matter. It's coming from an e-commerce company. It doesn't have to look pretty on the shelf. It has to be functional when it arrives with a customer. Now, this innovation is actually really cool. Look at the little legs at the bottom of the box that pop out. It means you can put the cup under the box. Now, I'm the guy that turns the thermostat down, way down. So when it comes to these sorts of things, I want every dropout. And that's why I end up buying lots of clothes, because I end up with bleach and so forth all over me. So in this box, what you actually have is a little gravity ramp. So it actually automatically lets everything out. That's cool. I love it. But the reason why I'm just sharing with you is actually look at the numbers. Because for me, that's a cuboid all day long. Stackable, palatable, fantastic. I love it. We can get that out to customers super fast. Customers are going to be happy with the innovation. And we're also being environmentally sensible because we're saving the amount of water that we're shipping as well. Cool stuff. The other thing that we need to be able to do is we need to be able to use data to drive operational decision making. So this slide, the blue lines, show you all of the various paths that our trucks, so we're not talking about all of the other trucks that we're using, just Amazon Transportation Services, that our trucks could take in order to move around Germany. The red is the arcs that we're going, the legs that we're going to use to be able to fulfill optimally the movement of the volume around the network. So, how good are we? If you give us 72 hours notice, we're not so good. We get a 12% improvement. But for Amazon, that's big money, okay? These are significant improvements, but all the same, it's a 12% improvement. But if you give us a little bit more notice, we're up to a 29% improvement. And to be clear, those are improvements on an already advanced scheduling capability. So it's quite exciting. And it's that sort of piece that's driving an operational. This is when your CFO is going, yeah, thank you. This is genuinely impactful. This is when your transportation operational manager is actually benefiting from the technology that you're putting in front of them and gaining operational impact. It's when people are able to come and touch the cloud, right? And that's what makes the difference for people's lives. The other piece that we can do is help with simple things like safety. You know, simple bit of AI. Guy's picking up his phone, that's a problem. The guy, you know, what distance is he maintaining from the vehicles in front? You know, you could use this for convoy marking. So if I'm going to be, I don't know, I'm a remote builder and I'm operating in a rural area, I may choose to not send my trucks through a small village. So therefore, I can actually assure that my trucks are not coming through the village by monitoring the path that they're taking, and so forth. Simple. Little camera, plugs on the windscreen. But you can also use computer vision for lots of other cool things in the supply chain. And in this instance, we're helping with PPE wearing. You know, how many times if you walk around a facility, you've got, you know, part industrial trucks moving, you've got areas where you've got high wrecking and whatever else you've got, maybe you're in oil and gas where safety is so very important. In those instances, we can use a little just standard CCTV camera, it's not expensive anymore, and we can assure that your team are wearing the correct kit. You can even help highlight it to managers, hotspots of where people don't wear the right kit. So you can go on signage or you can go and put someone down to help fix the problems. But the key thing here, at all times with computer vision, is not just the ability of the computer to be able to sense what's going on. It's really very firmly about so what. You can read the registration plate of a truck, so what? You can identify who the truck driver or who the truck operator is by reading the side of the vehicle. You know, mom and pop, number one, cool. But we can also take data off the chassis. We can also take data off the sea container. Standard cameras, nothing fancy. We can then use that in your gatehouse. So now the person doesn't have to come out and go, hey Bob, what's on your truck today? I could just simply have a sign that says lane 1, because I know who you are and I know what you've got. I could even link it to PO reconciliation. Pay the company now, because the truck has been received. Cool, right? Getting into the integration world. I can also use the same technology to go and scan my yard so I know where the volume is, because we all may have lost a truck at one point or another when operating in the supply chain space. And I have been that guy again that gets the phone call that says, John, there's a 40-foot truck full of PlayStations. Can you go and find it, please? I am full of lots of mistakes. So that ability to go and help actually identify where stuff is important. The other piece that I wanted to share is the notion of where things are coming from, dynamic planning. This is the operational laydown in Europe. You'll see lots of gaps. The gaps is to do with Post Coriath, French Postal Service, Belgian Post, Royal Mail, everybody else that we're using. So the gaps are filled. It's just not Amazon facilities. And what we need to be able to do is dynamically answer the question, if a customer orders something, where's it coming from? Now, before we've even placed the order, what have we told you? When you're going to get it, right? We made you the promise. Order it before 11 and you will get it by tomorrow. So we've made you a promise. So we've already simulated all of this. So the green ones, we can actually get the order to you on time. The blue ones have the volume, but we can't get it to you on time. Then we have a whole bunch of criteria along the side. Price, CO2 emissions, load balancing. We want to favor French Postal Service today because we've actually negotiated a good rate, and therefore we want to make sure that we actually fill up to our rate. Once we've filled up to our rate, we don't want a penalty, so we're going to suddenly make it more expensive, and we're going to drive artificially volume to another well-negotiated rate, and etc. So that's all going on simultaneously in the system. But what is also cool is that when someone comes along as a contractor, and they do this all the time, and they drill a hole through your power cable and your facility stops working, it's okay. You can look after your people. People first. because it will autonomously switch to Leal 1. And that's cool. And I've had it happen to me twice with Amazon.com. So how do we get there? Because there's lots of people will say to me, say, John, well, that's really good and it's very interesting, but how do we get to a service that is going to give us the visibility and the transparency that we need for our business to be successful? Well, every good data company is going to come and they're going to say to you, what? Build a data lake. But to be super clear, first of all, you can't swim in a data lake. And secondly, it doesn't actually solve anything on its own. So you can get all your technical team around and they'll tell you how beautiful it is. And it is a beautiful thing, fantastic. What does it do? Brings data together. But what we actually need is we need good business questions. If you've got a good question and you're bringing the right data out to answer that question, now it's worthwhile. Now I'm in. Because now I'm into a data-driven decision-making process. I have to answer the question based on the data. If I do that, then I can start using AI ML. And if I can start using AI and ML, I can get decision support, but more importantly, I can get automation. So you have to build the business through that process. Painful as it is, you have to build the business through that process. There are no shortcuts. There is no easy button. Here's an example. This is the Amazon supply chain again. Stuff on the left is our equivalent of an ERP, some cool AWS services, inevitable data lake, some persona running the supply chain, and a problem. This is the supply route running from Rome, Milan to Vienna. Thickness of the line is an indication of the volume being moved, the arrow the direction of travel. The Italian government, during the pandemic, for a whole host of national reasons, closed the border. Our supply chain self-healed. Now, you would have been really impressed by that. But you're not anymore, because you're just like, well, John, all you did is just take Leal 1 out, and we just went to ORI 4. Correct. Correct. It's at scale, making all of those small decisions so that it is autonomously selecting the next best option. Is this optimal? No chance. No chance. We have not negotiated the best price for the logistics. We have not negotiated the right position of the trucks, and so forth. So now if you're wondering what those persona are doing, they're not worrying about satisfying the customer, notifying the customer. That's all done. Customer's happy. That's done. They're focused on getting the business into a good position, negotiating with carriers, contacting them, making sure that we've got the harder problems, what you really need strategic thinkers to solve for. Is this about to happen in another market? Are we about to see this happen in the US? Do you remember we had that whole sort of pandemic domino thing going on? When is this going to happen in North America? Could we see states closing borders, et cetera? Small steps. Jeff did not wake up one day with a fully autonomous supply chain in his mom's garage. Right? Let's dispel that myth. Didn't happen. Nor did we actually get it right. We built a monolithic application, and it failed. So then what we did is we built 3 monolithic applications, and they failed. And that's whenever some very clever chap, somebody called Andy, came along and said, I know how to solve for this. And he created AWS eventually because he said, well, actually, we can also offer this to market. And that's where we end up where we are today. So how do you go about this? Well, the first thing that you need are use cases. What are those problems? What are those things that you want to solve for? Every one of those, multi-million-dollar savings for most big businesses. Then what you need to do is build the technology component necessary to solve for that use case. That use case. Then you need to ingest the data necessary to solve for that use case. What you don't do is ingest all the data, build a big solution, and then walk around the business saying, bring out your dead, because you're going to go and fix all these problems, right? That is super expensive, super time consuming, and I can guarantee you everything's going to look like a nail if you've only got a hammer. So in that instance, what we drive for here is use case identification, and I can also guarantee you with 45 years of experience, it is easier to get fatter than it is thinner. So you're going to add more and more capacity over time, and you're going to build more and more capability over time, and your platform is going to be more and more resilient over time, and most importantly, because you will be wrong, you can quickly course correct as things change. And getting into that mindset helps you become dynamic. But we can also make use of sophisticated technology, and we can also leverage things like Amazon's physical supply chain. So we might have an option that says, well, I could go and spend $250 million and build a facility in New York, or I could just put my volume into Amazon and have it distributed by Amazon on my behalf. And take that $250 million and build a facility in Brazil where we don't have the distribution capability that you need. So you can make big capital decisions by thinking dynamically about how you want to execute. And that's fun, right? That is fun. That gives you ways of doing things differently. The other thing you can do is you can start taking a very different view of life when it comes to things like inventory management. Does this look familiar to most people for inventory management? Yeah. And what's the safety buffer? How do we gauge safety buffer? Right? I mean, that's how nervous the chief supply chain officer is, right? That's the, I hear the CFO, he's telling me to keep the inventory down, I hear him, but at the same time, no one's going to thank me if I stock out. So the safety buffer is how close can the chief supply chain officer keep themselves together when things are going wrong. And they do go wrong. So really what you end up with is a safety stock that's based on your planned demand. And the problem then, and we've seen it writ large in the pandemic, is that when actual demand outstrips planned demand. So what can you do when actual demand is outstripping planned demand? What can you do? Plot the crash? Absolutely, it's coming. You can rob Peter to pay Paul. So you can start prioritizing one customer over another, making somebody unhappy, but making sure you're prioritizing a happy customer. You may have seen that play out in semiconductors. But really the trick here is that you're going to stock out. And the only way to get around this is to buy excessive amounts of stock, which is not good for your P&L. So that's not how Amazon does it at all. We are continuously running models that are changing the replenishment policy for every SKU. So that should mean, because we do stock out, it should mean that when you get to the actual demand exceeding planned demand by a little bit, you can dynamically change the replenishment policy for that SKU, which should give you a first mover advantage to secure the right levels of inventory to protect the customer experience. Should. We do stock out. We're not immune from it. Let's look at another thing. This is a great story. We have an apparel manufacturer that suddenly realized that they're actually also an agricultural business. So we want to make cocktail dresses. That's pretty cool. But we also want to be able to track cotton seed to the cocktail dress. Right? That's awesome. So we could go and find some really expensive technology, call out blockchain. We could go and find some really cool tags that we could put on every single grain of seed that's coming into the piece. We're not doing any of that. That's too expensive. No way. So you have to find very inexpensive mechanisms that enable you to be able to track this across the piece. So you end up in a situation where you're looking to get what is effectively end-tier integration, that great thing that we all know and love. We're having to identify where the cotton's coming from. We're having to identify where it's being aggregated. We're having to identify where it's then going to the factory. We then have to recognize that actually a cocktail dress is not made of just cotton. There will be other components, plastic buttons and various other things that will be added to it, so therefore the garment will actually be coming from lots of different sources. And then we have to be able to build a picture that the consumer and others will value. And that's cool. But it's also useful for a business perspective, right? So yes, it's great for our customers to be able to see that we're working in an ESG way and working towards sustainability. But it's also quite useful whenever you're talking about risk-adjusted pricing. And what do I mean by that? So I might be buying all of my cotton from, for argument's sake, Bangladesh. Good price, great relationship, fantastic product. But if it's subject to adverse weather every year, and I end up with a supply risk as a result, I may need to diversify a little bit. So I'm going to go and buy some volume from the next available cotton manufacturer. And in the end, I may actually find that I've got global mile risks. So I may need to go and find somewhere with really cheap labor, like California, and have a proportion of cotton coming from there, or whatever product that I'm manufacturing. I can then adjust the price according to risk. So I may artificially make my US source cheaper, and I may artificially make my foreign source more expensive so that my system adjusts the price so that I'm actually getting a reasonable amount of volume coming up from all the different sources so that I'm able to protect myself if the situation changes. And there's lots of little things that can be done there to help businesses, especially when it comes to protecting your strategic supplies. Then you need to be able to track it all. So this is a cool thing. This is perfect mile. Delivery estimated accuracy, DEA. And there is a test at the end of this presentation, you'll be pleased to know. So DEA. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're sustaining performance. Remember what I said at the start, Amazon does not own all aspects of its delivery. So this is actually monitoring the performance of third-party logistics providers, fulfillment centers, everyone that touches a parcel. This is the type of technology that underpins what I showed you previously with the notion of where's the volume coming from, how is it moving, what's the performance of the network. And it's the type of technology that enables you to get visibility over your operators so that you're able to get and to delight your customers with the movement of your volume, whether you're outsourcing it or running it yourself. So with AWS, what we seek to do is to build this notion. I mean, I call it, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of technical people will roll their eyes. I call it AWS Supply Chain OS, this notion of an operating system. This idea that you can take all sorts of different applications and they can all work seamlessly together. To be super clear, the business user kind of doesn't care what's under the hood. Do I have a steering wheel? Do I have an accelerator, brake? Can I drive the vehicle? That's what I want. And I want user interface to be, agile. I want to be able to see what I'm doing, and I want to be able to function. But under the hood, we might have bespoke built solution one for S&OP planning. We might have bought Pega Fuels for fuel optimization. We may be using SAP for our ERP system. We may be using Infor for our it doesn't matter. We're using all of these different capabilities, but the desire is to have them integrate, to communicate together so that we're able to provide the holistic view. And when we look at that, what I hope is coming across loud and clear here is this notion that we're bringing data to action to support the business. I hope what's come out loud and clear. There is no point in surfacing data at all if you're going to do nothing with it. Right? Pointless. If you're going to let them crash, let them crash. If you're going to go fix it, go fix it. And this always goes back to the analogy of air traffic control. You've heard people talk about this notion of logistics control towers, supply chain control towers, and so forth. This is where we are with surfacing data. And I never understand why it is when people use that analogy. Because when you think about it, what ends up happening is that you have dashboards everywhere of crashed airplanes in your business. Right? And I've seen them, right? I mean, I've spent all my life walking into dashboards of crashed airplanes. John, you were wrong yesterday because. Your performance is down yesterday because. But yet the compute power is not helping me by looking ahead and giving me an indication of what I could do to make a difference. So for example, John, your delivery accuracy was poor yesterday. Thanks. Right? Seriously, thanks. Where, John, pager's going. If you don't put that box on that truck in the next 30 minutes, you're going to have a DEA hit. Thanks, right? I can go and help my outbound team. Or there's a 95% chance that that parcel is not going to be delivered on wave one. That's useful, right? That's useful because I can phone ahead. Hey, Mrs. Customer, are you going to be in? Because I've got a parcel for you, right? So you can check these things out. I was working with one customer. Their parcels happened to be MRI scanners. And believe it or not, they would arrive at hospitals. They'd be like, ding dong, I've got an MRI scanner for you. Not here, Gov. The whole idea that you would have this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment arriving and they're not ready to receive. It's that sort of level. And we've all been there, right? We've all been there with things like wind farms and everything else with, huge items arriving that are not ready to receive. So that's about surfacing the data. The next thing is the notion of predictive analytics. So we surface the data that tells us where all our trucks are. That's cool. But then we get the prediction that says the truck's going to arrive at 12 o'clock. That's helpful. At least I've got a prediction. But it's not really helping us a lot because we're not getting any guidance from it. You see? So here's your trucks. The truck is not going to make it to the fulfillment center on time. There's your ETA. Guidance. Because the truck is not going to make it to the fulfillment center on time, you're going to move it to a secure parking area that is 60% the way there, which is going to enable the driver to rest so that it's ready for delivery the next day. That's cool. That's actually helpful. And then when you look at the next stage of automation, it says, truck driver 1, drive to secure parking area that has been secured for you. You're in parking bay 45, and your new destination will be FC whatever at 12 o'clock tomorrow morning. Don't need to talk about it. Don't need to do anything about it. I know what I'm going to do. It's what I always do. That's when it gets helpful. And for me, when I think about these things, it's really, it's simple logic about things like even weather. I know you're saying there's a British guy not talking about the weather yet. It's okay. I will. If it's going to be raining tomorrow and I've got to walk to the train station and I'm going, it's okay to tell me it's raining tomorrow. It'd be better to say, John, bring your umbrella. But it would be even better if there was an Uber sitting out my door when I walk downstairs. So it's that ability to be able to step the logic and to be able to create the systems that step the logic. So if you're sitting there as a developer, and if you're sitting there as a business user, it's okay to try to push the boundary. You may not get there yet, it's okay. Push the boundary and ask for guidance. Don't give me the ETA, tell me the so what. Yeah? Tell me the so what. And if the so what is a logical business piece, then let's go build for that. So that's whenever we try to move away from insights and we try to move much more towards automation. But the single most important thing underpinning all of this is this. You are not going to be able to start tomorrow with a fully automated something in your business. Right? So just get that out of your head. And nor am I going to be able to walk into your business and say, oh, I've solved every problem in your business. I'll come and fix it for you right now. Right, first of all, I'm not that arrogant. And secondly, I'm going to fail. And you're going to enjoy watching me fail if I came in with that attitude anyway. So you're going to fail. So what we need to be able to do is just take step by step by step and progressively get better insights, get better predictions, get better outcomes, and continuously drive step by step by step. And keep at it, 1%, 1%, 1%. That means not having waterfall builds. That means helping your IT team recognize that we're not having waterfall builds no matter which way they want to dress it up, right? And it also means when you do bring in SI partners, GSI partners, it also means working with them to say, I'm comfortable with you not delivering all of this in one go. Let's get into action. Let's see the benefits. Let's see the improvements. Let's accept some risk together. Let's accept some failure together. And let's start driving together. So if I had any final thoughts in this space, it would be simply this. When we go and start doing all of this, there's 3 things that are going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is that you're going to fail. Get comfortable with it. You're going to fail. The very next thing that's going to happen is that someone's going to be misunderstood. Now, if I'm misunderstood, it's brilliant. John's right, the world's wrong. And I've got the solution, and I'm going to go fix the world. That's cool. It's really empowering for me. Other people, not so much, but I like that notion. But as a leader, it's actually the other way around. What happens when my team, I don't understand what they're trying to achieve? And what is worse, they keep failing, trying to achieve this thing that I don't understand. So how can I, as a leader, encourage people to work in an environment where I don't quite understand what they're trying to achieve, to help dust them off and say, keep going, and give them the confidence to try and keep experimenting. That's the hard bit about being misunderstood. Yeah. And then the final aspect of all of this is that innovation isn't something that you can go and buy. I tried it. I bought a camper van, and I thought I would be able to surf immediately. I can't. Right? I bought a Mac thinking I would suddenly be a fantastic engineer and fantastic designer. I'm not. So you can't just go plug it in. But I can guarantee you now that there is somebody that's just gone for a cigarette break somewhere in one of your offices that knows how to improve inventory holding by 1 day. And there's somebody that's currently sitting in a truck driving along the road that knows how to improve fuel optimization or price for the fuel, if only we did X. So how do you get out of their way to help them innovate? Okay, anyway, that's me. Any questions that people may have, I'm happy to take.